Life isn't always easy.
1 year went by, 2, then 5, then 10. I still didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Deep down, my mind was always telling me that, hey, you're not good enough.
But during those painful moments, God is always with us, and that changes everything. Join us as we navigate the tough times on this episode of Soul Vibes.
Have you ever been in a situation where you felt so hopeless or so lost, you thought that things would never get better? No matter where you looked or wherever you went, nothing seemed to go right for you? That your own mind debunked the theory, time is the greatest healer? Nirankari ji, I'm Jasbir Sooch, and together with Arti ji and Romie ji, we are going to hear from two individuals who at one point of their lives had those same types of feelings.
That's right, we all experience challenging moments. But sometimes these can also be the moments that help us grow. And often it's the tough times that take us deeper in our relationship with God. We have Arti joining us now to share one of his tough experiences with bullying. Welcome, Arti.
Thank you so much for having me, Nirankari.
Nirankari. Being bullied can be hard at any age. Can you tell us about your experience?
I encountered this guy from the start of grade 9 when I was around 13 to 14 years old. He was in a few of my classes and he would curse on me sometimes, but he would try to play it off as a joke. But when someone does that over and over again, it starts to cross a line. Then in grade 10 one day, we had group presentations in one of our classes. Their group was about to go and I was assigned the job to press pause on the music that they would have playing in the background. Unfortunately, I accidentally hit the pause button a little earlier than they wanted me to, and this guy that I'm talking about was outrageous. He was very angry at me and used this opportunity to really put me down. He started cursing and shouting at me in front of the entire class. And I don't know what about the day exactly made me so weak, but I just took everything he said personally to heart. It led me to a state of imbalance where my mind wasn't able to think straight and my body was in a state of panic. I wasn't able to let go of those emotions for a long time, and I felt I was suffering the consequences of self-doubt and negative self-talk in my mind for the next 2 to 3 years.
So 2 to 3 years is a pretty substantial amount of time, especially when you're in high school. When you say it negatively impacted you, what did that look like day to day?
What's interesting is from the outside, I think nobody could tell. I was this positive and happy guy that whenever you saw me, I had a smile. But in reality, I would go home and cry on a regular basis. This was not just a one-off situation, on a regular basis, and I would be scared of going to school.
I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. Was there anything that helped you during this time?
The most important thing that helped me was having a strong support system, and for me, that meant having my family to fall back on. Within 2 to 3 days of this situation, I went to my family and told them about this. They witnessed how much this affected me, and there may have been 1,000 times when I went to my family with the same exact questions on how to deal with it. They were always there to listen and give me actionable tips on how I can get better. I would also go to satsang regularly, which would make me feel more centered. One thing I'll note is that having a strong support system can do much if you don't go and tell them yourself, because no one can read your mind. So I think it's very important for you to be brave enough and not shy to speak up your feelings with the people who are close to you in your life. That could be your family or other saints in satsang.
You mentioned that your family was a great support system. Can you think of something they said or some advice you got from them that you remember and carry with you to this day?
My family always gave me a sense of hope and reminded me that these are normal human emotions. They told me that in life you'll face situations many times where people will put you down, and that this was just the beginning in this journey to grow stronger as a human being.
It feels like sometimes God has to shake us to make us. You mentioned that this experience made you stronger. When you look back, do you feel that that was God's blessing?
100%. As Satguru Mata Sudiksha ji Maharaj recently stated in her Discourse, I learned to see these events as God's gift. I really believe that God doesn't put you in situations that you can't handle. I had to continue to do my part of being a loving person and following the satsang's teachings throughout all this.
Ashriji, thank you for sharing your experience and for being willing to open up about something that sounds like it could be hard to talk about. We really appreciate having you here.
Thank you, Ji, Nirankari Ji.
Ashrji's experience is sad to hear, but it might resonate with a lot of listeners. According to the Pew Research Center, nearly half of teens living in the United States experience some form of bullying. And we know that bullying can start as early as elementary school, and adults can face it at the workplace too.
Ashrji's inspiring story reminds me of what we often hear in Sangat, that although we face many external life challenges, it's about how we handle it and about how we control our mind, which can sometimes overtake our thoughts. For example, in Ashrji's story, he had internalized his thoughts and feelings, which became heavy baggage he carried with him for years. If we follow the teachings of the mission and realize a big obstacle to moving forward is also ourself, then we're able to overcome. If we learn how to surrender to God's will, then we can have internal peace, even when there's external negativity.
I love that. We don't always know why things happen, but you're right, our biggest obstacle can be us. If we can't change our situation, we can still change our perspective and how we handle things. That's where I feel God realization really helps. We can find comfort and strength knowing God loves us and is always with us.
There's definitely a lot to take away from Ashrji's story, but I want to focus on two things that really stood out for me. First and foremost for me would be the family support that he continued to receive. To me, that was huge, because oftentimes when I hear a story like this, I often wonder, where's the family? Why is this person battling alone? To hear that he relied heavily on his family from the get-go, who he describes as a very collective and spiritual family, I think that played a huge role in how this turned out for Ashrji. If that family bond wasn't there, there's no telling how this could have turned out for this young man. Because, as we often heard, people have taken drastic measures to get rid of problems such as this. And the other takeaway I got was his reflection from all of this, his ability to see the big picture after he got out of this stage in his life. He understood that God put him in this position and that God is the one who eventually took him out of it. It was sort of a test of his faith, which he probably didn't understand at that time. And lastly, on a side note, I do want to make mention that for anyone who is listening to this podcast and unfortunately may be on the wrong side of this story and is in a position where he or she is bullying someone, please take a moment to understand what kind of effect this plays on an individual. You could be scarring or damaging someone for a very, very long time, if not for life. So if you are in this position, please ask them for forgiveness and help the other person to get closure, because that is very, very important as well.
Absolutely. To experience growth in our personal and spiritual life, we have to overcome these challenges, but many times we don't know how to do that. We don't have the knowledge or the wisdom or that self-guidance to overcome obstacles. This is where the teachings of the mission are helpful for us, as they put things into perspective.
And not only do we not know how to overcome these challenges, but as was in Ashrji's case, sometimes we are just too young to understand anything that's going on. And as you explained briefly, but that's where the company of good saints come into play. They are there to constantly remind us that we are not alone in this game of life. And yes, there will be tough times that we all face, but with Satguru Mata Sudiksha Ji Maharaj's teachings, we will certainly be able to navigate through them, no matter the type or size of the obstacle.
As we continue our conversation on challenging times, we're fortunate to have Anuji join us as our next guest speaker. Anuji, welcome.
Thank you, Arti ji, Nirankari ji.
Nirankari ji. Tough times can take different forms, and knowing a little about your story, you had a dream that you had to wait for 12 years to come to fruition. Can you tell us about your experience?
My husband Samarji and I love kids, and we wanted our own. Never realized it was going to take 12 years to hold our first child. Those 12 years were not easy. I'm going to use we instead of I, because it was not my journey alone, but it was our journey. Samarji made sure I knew that. We had miscarriages after miscarriages. There were so many moments where I felt I couldn't do it. I had gone through multiple treatments, self-injecting medications. It was physically and emotionally very painful. And seeing younger couples getting married after us and having kids right away, it was just me who was experiencing the losses.
Anuji, sometimes we can feel God's hand on us even in the darkest moments. Did you experience that in any way during this time?
Absolutely. I felt God's love through Samarji. He has been a solid rock. He never missed a single doctor's appointment, and it was like having Nirankari by my side. He was so deeply rooted in his faith that it gave me the sthirta and stability I needed.
Something like infertility can cause a strain on the marriage relationship, right?
Yes, indeed. I remember the doctor telling me that many times when couples are going through this, they don't make it, and they drift apart. For us, we came out stronger, thanks to Satguru Nirankari and the teachings of the mission.
You didn't just go through the struggles of infertility, you went through the hardship of death and waiting, and it's a lot. Yet through it all, I remember seeing you come to Sangat every year on Mother's Day with roses to give to all the other moms. That was really amazing.
I think it was the divine plan. Coming to satsang, the teachings of Satguru, and my father always taught me to do seva no matter what. I have to say, service was the key for me and what kept me going. I never thought about it, like I'm not getting flowers. I was like I should be spreading joy no matter what. Life is not always roses, but you can definitely pass out roses.
That's beautiful. It's true. Your problems cease to exist when you lose yourself in the service of others. A lot of our listeners are probably wondering, like I am, just that type of divine grace that you carried with you. How would you say spirituality played a part in that?
Satsang played a huge part in my life. I remember occasionally driving by myself, crying and just having this conversation with Nirankari and seeking guidance. I felt talking with Nirankari was the key for me as it gave me strength to navigate through tough times. I heard Sadguru Baba Hardev Singh Ji's Vichar, where he said, when you're driving uphill, you don't press on the brakes. You have to press harder on the accelerator. And he said, during tough times, same thing. You have to do more seva, Simran, Satsang. You don't put brakes on your faith.
As you accelerated on your journey, Anuji, did you ever have a moment of acceptance that this may not happen and that's okay?
We were holding on so tight to this desire to have a child, but after we lost our triplets, it was then we accepted, okay, this may not manifest for us. And we said to Nirankari, okay, this is your will. Sab kuch aapki raza mein hota hai. Let's move forward. Then a few years later, a doctor told us, you should try again. So for the last time, we did our 4th insemination. And it worked. But again, it was not easy because it was a high-risk pregnancy. I was on bed rest for 2 months. But with God's grace, our daughter arrived full-term and beyond. You know, कहते हैं कि जब समय होता है तभी मिलता है और जिसने आना है और जाना है वो निरंकार के हाथ में है. So that was for us a beautiful moment, of course, holding your child from something you have gone through for 12 years. I don't think I have the words to express. When they put the baby on top of me, I was just crying and thanking Satguru कि वो भी समा था और ये भी समा है और शुक्राना ही बनता है हर वक्त.
And your story has a little twist to it.
Yes, it does. After 7 years of beautiful journey with Varni ji, we were blessed with our second daughter, Vanya ji, without any treatments at all. She was all natural.
It's such a heartwarming story. It seems like Nirankari had this plan for you all along, that you were going to be the mother of 2 beautiful girls.
Yes, indeed. And it's been amazing. What a blessing.
Thank you, Anuji, from all of us for having the courage to share your story. Stay blessed.
Thank you, Arti ji, for having me here.
That was such an inspiring story Anuji shared with us about faith and surrendering to the will of God. It reminds me of a passage in the Avtar Bani, verse 18. Everybody gets only what God ordains. One must receive what God wills, and what God wills, one receives. Jasbir ji, what did you think of Anuji's story?
This story just goes to show you that we may lose faith in God, but God never loses faith in us. He knows exactly what we need when we need it.
It also makes me think about the most powerful strength we have as human beings, which is our spiritual strength, as this allows us to overcome life's biggest challenges. In the Sangha, we often hear saints say, you just have to surrender. Then the question becomes, how do we surrender? What does that really mean? How do I do that? Who do I surrender to? In the mission, we learn we have these 5 principles. We have this Gyan. We practice Simran Seva and Satsang. We think of the principles. All those principles are meant to remove our ego, to remove our sense of self, so we can see the ultimate truth. We can only do that if we have Gyan, which gives us knowledge of what is God, who am I. By following this practical spiritual path, we truly learn how to surrender.
What you said about surrender, it's so important. I remember when our son Arjun was born, he was hospitalized, and then he got a bad diagnosis, where we were told he would have to stay at the hospital for a couple weeks, and the doctors weren't sure what he would be like at that point. And I just remember crying so much. I had been listening to this bhajan a couple days prior, and the lines were going through my head. Pal pal main tere saath rehta hoon, डरने की क्या बात जब मैं बैठा हूँ. And I felt God there. But the weird thing is, not once did I pray for God to heal Arjun. And I just prayed, God, I don't know what's good for him. I don't know if asking to heal him in this moment, what kind of life he might have, what that means for his future. So I couldn't ask that. All I could do is surrender, because God knows more than us, right? We're limited and we might think we know what's best, but God sees the bigger picture. So in that moment, the only comfort that came to me was in knowing the one who knows. We were blessed because the next day the doctors came and they said it was all a mistake. They had been pumping him with all these medications for no reason, so it was a blessing. But like Anuji said in her story, sometimes we have to have that moment where it's full surrender. God, please show me your will.
That's so true, Arti ji. We as human beings have a very limited vision. We can't see what tomorrow is going to bring, but Nirankari can see our whole life and the interconnectedness of our life with others like our children. To wrap up what we learned, we all experience challenges in life. It may be the passing of a loved one, our own health, interpersonal relationships, loss of a job or business, so many challenges that we have. But the biggest obstacle to move forward afterwards and have peace, as we always learn in the mission, is to overcome ourself. So if we can overcome this self through spiritual teachings and the way we live our life and surrounding ourselves with positive people, we can overcome these challenges.
Yeah, I think the key takeaways for me are, don't be afraid. God is with you. Make Nirankari your best friend. Ask Nirankari for help. Talk to people. Don't feel like you have to keep it within yourself. Learn the art of surrender. Surrender doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong, because only when you accept can you actually move forward in your life. And finally, the importance of having satsang, having the company of other devotees who, when times do get tough, can guide you on the right path. Because it could be very easy to turn to substance abuse, gambling, depression, right? But when you have the saints like Anuji and Ashritji had in their lives to help guide them, you know you're going to be okay.
The key to all of this is the company we keep, the company of those mighty saints who help build us, shape our positive mindset, and help stable our faith through the tough times. And who puts those saints in our lives? God does. He gives us a problem, but also sends a solution with it. Tu mera rakha, sabni thai. We often overthink things, but if we were to slow our ever-racing minds down, we would realize that the answer we're looking for is simply within us. Tough times are guaranteed, and when you take care of one, another one will be waiting for you around the corner. That's just how life goes. But just as we heard from our 2 guests today, how we deal with the tough times is a measure of our understanding of the situation and the reliance of our faith in God. The more satsang, simran, and seva we do, the more we strengthen our faith and our mindset that no matter the situation, we will get through it. Like they say, tough times never last, but tough people do. Thank you to all of our listeners. Until next time, Nirankari.